Hello and welcome to this week's landscape tutorial. This is the first of 25 outlines in the Landscape Watercoloring Book. So if you're new around here, I create watercoloring books. This is my landscape. I also have a floral book, but I do original outlines and then I teach you step by step how to paint them. So let's get started. Yay, okay, so we just finished these fun practice pages. So if you haven't done them already, you can just go look at the playlist. It has them listed underneath the Landscape Watercoloring Book. You need a medium round tip brush and just any paints you have. I am using the Winsor Newton palette. I sell a 24 paint palette that is amazing. If you're looking for one, I highly recommend it. I'll link it below. But really any will work. If you have some at home, that's perfect. I like to tape my page down, especially with landscapes, because it helps with water control. With most watercolor paper, if you're getting it fairly wet, it's gonna morph a little bit. So that's why tape is important. I like it. And then it's really satisfying at the end to take it off. So let's tape it and then we'll get going. Okay, so now you can grab your brush and some clean water, and we're just gonna put water all over the top. So just anywhere where the sky is. So put that water right up to the outline of the mountain. And once your entire top half is wet, then you can grab your blues, pinks, and yellows. So what we're going to do first is drop in a blue to the top left corner and just gradually let the water take it. This is what creates that really loose, beautiful, cloudy, misty sky. As you can see, I'm adding pink into the bottom, bordering the mountain. And the water is nice because then you can just kind of leave white areas in the page and it'll create those clouds for you. So as you go, it'll look a lot like just a gradient of blue to pink. And then that's when we're going to add in the yellow and drop it into kind of where the bottoms of your clouds will be. And you want to do this while everything's fairly wet still. If it starts drying, that's fine. You can just grab a wet brush and just paint along those harsher lines and it'll ease up for you. Okay, so I have it pretty much how I want. We're going to let it dry a little bit. And while we do that, we're going to work on the field. So I'm grabbing a green and I'm diluting it down quite a bit with water. So that's going to be our base layer, and then we can add in colors as we go. And then once the sun or the sky is dry, then we can see if there's things that we want to tweak a little bit more. So you have that diluted green and you're just kind of brushing it the same way you did with that first layer of water all the way down to the bottom of the page. And you want to leave those areas that I kind of drew out for the flower bundles and the trees and things, just so that we can create that depth and interest with the whites mixed in with the flowers. So now that that first layer is done, I'm dropping in a darker shade of green into that top further area of the field, and I'm just going on horizontal strokes and making kind of shaded areas towards the sides of the field. As you can see, the like very front foreground of my painting, I've left pretty light, not a whole lot of difference. So that's what we're doing first. And if you're wanting these more foresty, dull greens, if your palette has a lot of vibrant greens, what you do to make that color is you can add the opposite side of the color wheel. So you can grab your green and you add just a little bit of red or a little bit of purple if you want it more blue toned, and that will help create those colors. Now that the sky is a lot more dry, there might be still a few little wet parts, but it's a really good time to go back in and more define those clouds that you want. So as you can see, I have a few small ones towards the top of the page and then some longer clouds in the middle. And what I'm doing is I'm grabbing my blue and I'm kind of just shaping those the way that I want. And I'm kind of following the line of what the water already made for me, just to keep it more loose and more organic. So I have that blue, and then I think I'm going to add some purple or some pink more into the middle ground. Yep, so let's do some purple to separate, kind of help with that gradient in the sky. Now we're just adding a little bit of pink on the bottom of those clouds. For this next portion, we're kind of going to be jumping around quite a bit because with watercolor, if you want certain effects, you gotta work your way around to where there's not bleeding when you don't want there to be. So first we're going to work on this back mountain range, and I found a dark purple that I really liked, and then I diluted it down with water, and that is where that brighter side of that back mountain is going to be. And once you have that, you can drop in the darker shade of purple and just have that kind of blend in with the other side. If it's not as dark as you want from the get-go, that is okay. We work from lights to darks, so there's a good chance I will finish this and then we'll come back and add more colors on to layer that mountain range. If you notice that your sky and your mountains are bleeding together, that's a good indicator that you need to wait a little bit. So if you see how on mine, you can see the sky and the pinks and the purples kind of blending together, and you don't want that. So I'm grabbing my wet brush, I cleaned it off, and I'm just dragging down to get rid of that. Sometimes you need to dab with your paper towel. There we go. Okay, so if you notice that happens, that is very normal. When you're painting, sometimes things just don't go exactly how you want. So you can dab it off and it's like it never happened, and you can start over. You just got to give it a little bit more time. So first, before we keep going with that, we're gonna start with the pink flowers, and I'm gonna do my brighter shade of pink first. So we're doing something called the dabbing method or technique, and basically you're just pressing down little dots, and you can leave a little bit of white space, but there is a good amount of water, and that's okay. If you see it puddling, you can pull that up with your brush, or you can just leave it there and it'll create a little bit more of like watermarks and texture for your flowers. But you're going to be doing little dabs for your flowers on all 3 sections. And then once that's done, we can come back and we'll work on the mountain range again. Okay, now we can go back to these mountain ranges. They are my favorite part of this whole painting. So what we're gonna do is you can mix a darker blue or a darker purple. I have mixed blue and like a burnt red together to make this really dark, earthy looking purple. So I'm dropping that in now that we've given it time to have the more distinct lines between the sky and the mountain. And you're kind of just lining it and then dropping the color in where you want to. And as you can see, I am leaving some white space. That can be, I took this picture in spring, so there was a little bit of snow on the mountain, so that's kind of what that resembles in this. But it also is just a really great way to show reflection and the sun hitting the mountain in different ways. So I'm not filling the entire shaded side of the mountain with that dark purple. I'm kind of adding in some colors. As you can see, I'm adding in a little bit more of like a violet, more pink to the bottom. And then we're going to come up with that same like purplish pink shade, and I'm going to add it to that brighter side of the mountain range. And then we're going to mix in some green, and we're not going to overlap them, but we're going to make them touch so that they blend together, and it's going to look really beautiful. See how pretty that is? Because I still have my palette from my original painting, I already have a lot of the colors that I need, but we are going to be making like a yellow / brown color as the base layer for this front mountain. And we're going to be working on the left side to give that back mountain range more time to dry. So don't worry, this is kind of, there is an ugly stage of painting and we're kind of going to be entering it for a minute, but I promise it will all work out. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab that yellow and you're going to put it in, as you can see I have the lines, and you're going to put it in that middle area of that left side of the mountain. And as you can see, I have diluted it down with water quite a bit. So if you notice that you're starting from the get-go with a really heavy pigment or like really dense color, you can add water and just kind of dilute it down quite a bit, because this color does not need to be super dark. We're going to be building on top of colors. As you can see in the original painting, we do layers of colors on this mountain range. So I'm coming over to this side of the mountain range, but I don't know if you can tell, I am leaving the tiniest line of dry paper to make sure that it does not blend together. We want to make sure these mountains flow together but have enough differences. So our next color is that diluted purple that we put down in the very beginning of that first mountain range. And you're just going to kind of bring it down to the base of the mountain. Don't worry if they mix together. Purple and yellow kind of mix together to make a muddy looking color, and that's okay. So as you can see, I've started with purple and then I dropped in a little bit of blue, and I'm bringing that up and doing purple at the top of the mountain as well. I don't know if you can tell, but I am still leaving little white areas for reflection. So towards that top right-hand side of the mountain, you can see little areas that are still just your dry page. And then we're going to bring in our foresty green and just drop it into the top of that mountain range. All right, so we're going to use this darker green. Again, if you are needing to darken or make your greens more foresty, remember you can add red or purple to them, and that will give you that more neutral looking color. But we're going to add some into this corner of the mountain, and then you can drop in some greens to the top to mix in with the purple. But then we're going to use this diluted green and kind of layer this yellow that we put down in the very beginning. That will give it more of like a grass feel to that side of the mountain. If you want to, you can leave some space for that yellow to show through. But if you're not a fan of the yellow, you can just cover it completely. It still gives that same, it'll show through a little bit because of watercolor being transparent. You'll still see some of that yellow come through. So now we're bringing some green over into that purple that we laid down right under the yellow. All right, this is when things start to come together and look really pretty. We're gonna get our darker purple and we're going to start adding some more deeper contrast into the mountain range. And as you can see, the painting is still wet. A lot of what I'm doing with this mountain range is a wet on wet technique, which creates that more loose look. So once you've mixed the purple that you like or the dark blue, you can start making, I'm making sure that my lines at the top of that mountain range are nice and crisp. And then we're going to drop in those darker colors throughout. You see how this is already adding a lot of dimension to the mountain range? So this is very similar to the dabbing method that we did for the flowers. I'm adding some green over top of this yellow that we put down. See how you can still see the yellow come through even though we basically covered the entire thing? That will help your sky and your mountain range to flow together well because there's yellow in your clouds. We're almost done with this mountain range. There's just a few more things that I want to do. First, we're going to add in some more vibrant greens to the mix. So while it's still wet, I'm having still foresty and still more neutral, but more vibrant than we've been doing. So I'm dropping it in to kind of where the purple ends. And then to really add some fun colors, I'm going to add in some pink and purples to really make that back mountain and this front one blend together really well. Now's a great time to do any finishing touches between the two mountain ranges. So if you like some of the colors that are in your front mountain, you can bring them back. I think I'm going to add a little bit more green to my back mountain range, just on that highlighted side. And then we're going to get started on the flowers again. Okay, so I am going to use my friend's palette that she makes all these pigments from scratch. Really cool. That's Nancy with Brighter Day Pigments. But obviously, if you don't have these, that is totally fine. I'm just using a darker and lighter pink and then some different shades of green. But I just wanted to try these out to see how they would go. So I'm starting with my lighter pink and I'm just dropping in that same dab method to add some fun texture layering colors to these flowers. As you can see, I'm leaving a lot of that base color there still, and then I will come back in here in a minute with that darker pink. This is what it looks like. How pretty is that? So for these background trees, we're using a very similar method to these flowers with the dabbing, because a lot of them are bushes. So the left two little bushes that you see are just going to be dabbing, and then we're going to use a different color of green. We're kind of just like spreading these colors throughout, mixing them all together, and it's going to look really pretty. So first we're starting with more of a vibrant green. Just dabbing. That was a lot of pigment, so I'm going to grab some water and just continue on with that. And my mountain range is still a little bit wet, so it is going to bleed a little bit, but I'm okay with that. I don't mind. You can always come back in once it's dry and add some more distinct lines if you want to. See how I'm using the same color pretty much through just random areas in the greenery, and then we're going to add a different color. I'm going to mix more of a more like burnt green, foresty green, which we make that with, if you remember, red and green. Sometimes it can look a little bit more brown, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. But I'm just dropping those colors in randomly throughout the bushes, and then with my bigger trees on the right side, I do want to add those darker colors in a little bit more. So these shapes are super loose. They don't even really need to look like anything, because when they're all together, you'll get the idea of what they are. So pretty. Okay, so while this is all pretty much wet, you can drop in colors throughout like we have been, and then we're going to use this same green to do those really light stems for the flowers. So how you're going to do this is you're going to use a vertical stroke and do very light pressure and just bring that green right up to the flowers. They don't need to be, we don't want the stems to be straight up. So you're going to have them kind of be, some of them starting from other areas, some of them are going to be thicker than the others. You kind of just want to do your very best to make them look as organic as you can. And it's okay if you leave white space. I actually love seeing some of the white space that is left with this technique. And then if you're wanting to add a little bit more colors into your stems, then you can add in some red or some blues or whatever. I really like this vibrant green that we have going. Okay, so now that you've given some time for your greenery in the background to dry a little bit more, if you're wanting to add a little more dimension, you can definitely do that. Or you can add in some fun trees, some pine trees, wherever you want. And then really the last thing that we're going to do is add a more darker, more vibrant pink to our flowers. And then we're going to come in with a really diluted green, but we're going to add some shading into our field of grass to show maybe where the sun is hitting the flowers. All right, I'm just doing some last minute finishing touches, but other than that, this is done and it looks so beautiful. So if you painted along with me and you liked this and it was helpful, let me know in the comments. Obviously subscribe because let's be friends. But I'm excited to paint with you next time. Thanks for following along.